Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and it is a very small, select group of people who have been on both Strange Mosaic and Internal Alchemy. I think there's just two. So today's guest is going to be joining the rarefied air only held by Sophia Smallstorm and Howdy McCoskey. So that's pretty good company. Daniel Berdichevsky has recently informed me. I've known you for about a year now, right? And it was obvious to me at a certain point you were losing a little bit of weight, but I looked at you a few weeks ago and I was like, wow, you look so young and so thin. How much weight have you lost? And Daniel said to me 100 pounds. And I was like, wow. So I have a couple of things I want to talk to him about, both in terms of his physical transformation, but also for those of you who've watched, us before. He's been on a couple of times with me. We get into some other weird, anomalous sort of occurrences in our realities. And I think there may be a connection between how he has transformed himself and what he experiences. So Daniel Berdichevsky, congratulations on an amazing physical accomplishment, and welcome to Internal Alchemy. How you doing, my friend?
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. Thank you. I'm doing good. Thanks.
All right. So I just met you last year. It seems like we've known each other longer because we've had so many good conversations. But
I thought it was longer. Are you sure it wasn't like 2 years? It was really only last year?
Yeah, I think you were on my show for the first time last May. And
wow.
And we
were a little before that, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. And so I'm assuming that by then you were already sort of well into your health transition. But maybe because I haven't known you for all these years, can you kind of fill me in on sort of that aspect of your life? Were you what led you to the space where you're like, I need to lose 100 pounds? Can you just kind of fill me in on your journey up to getting that heavy, and then what happened that made you decide I need to do something? Kind of give me the backstory on all that.
Well, I actually started late July last year, so it wasn't in May. So I've lost this weight since late July.
Really? So when I met you, you weighed 100 pounds more than you weigh now?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I don't look it, but it is 100 pounds. But yeah.
Well, there's a few pictures of you, because some pictures it looks more, depends what you're wearing, the angle where you are. There are some pictures where I was just like, holy shit, is he 12? Right? What is, So, okay, so that transformation did all happen within the last year. That's incredible. But can you tell me, how did you get to that point? Can you just sort of fill me in a little bit on your health and that kind of stuff over the course of your life? What happened that led you to a place of 100 pounds overweight?
It's up and down. It's been a struggle my whole life. It's not the first time. In 2014, I lost 70 pounds. In 2008, I lost 60 pounds. So it's been up and down my whole life. And then the last 2-3 years, I didn't check my weight at all. I didn't do anything. I didn't care. I was just whatever. And then I finally did, and I'm like, okay, this is the most I've ever weighed. So time to do something. And I started doing something, and started doing quite a lot, actually. So
has the weight been a struggle your whole life, or just in your adult life?
Yeah, my whole life, since I was a kid. Yeah, since I was a kid. Yeah. But mostly I would say adult. It's really fluctuated like crazy, a lot. Mm-hmm. I've fluctuated, not 100 pounds though, but definitely 50, 70 pounds plus or minus multiple times. Definitely since at least 18. And yeah, I guess more so adult life, but as a kid as well too. Yeah. So yeah, it's not, yeah.
Okay. So has this been accompanied by other health problems, or is it really just been you're generally healthy, but you struggle with weight?
I've actually, yeah, I've been generally healthy, even, with weight. I managed to do a lot, even, while being at that weight. Like I went on a 20-mile mountain hike with no problem. So, I mean, my health was still reasonably good, but it's definitely improved significantly since last July. Just by what I could tell, what I'm able to do physically
Right.
right now that I've never been able to do in my life. Like I could run up 80 flights of stairs like it's nothing right now. For
Wow.
example, like the equivalent of 80 flights,
Yeah.
not like literally an 80-story building. Or I could, run for miles and miles and not get tired, things like that. So I was not able to do that last July. I was still able to do some crazy stuff though, but it's just gotten much better.
Okay. So you haven't had any significant like heart problems, diabetes, anything like that?
No, I'm kind of lucky. Blood sugar has always been really good, like no matter what. Yeah, nothing really like major. I did have like, they thought I might have had sleep apnea for a while, but they couldn't really determine it. And I did have some issues, but nothing like really super serious. So I don't think I even had sleep apnea though, honestly. I did have some issues with my asthma was a bit worse. It's gotten a little bit better, and that's about it.
Okay, so when you decided last July that like, holy shit, this is a problem, what did you start doing? Right. I'm, you and I know each other from this weird Mandela effect, anomalous, like shifting realities, temporal navigation reality. But for like how I make a good portion of my living is as a nutrition consultant and a life coach. Right. And
Okay.
so I help people with that process. And I've been a person who's had a significant health journey. For me, it hasn't really ever involved being overweight, but it's definitely involved certain kinds of food addictions, certain like having to make modifications based on what really works for my body and what doesn't. And I help people
Right.
through that process. And, a lot of people even people who get help really, really struggle with weight loss. I mean, to be able to lose 100 pounds, I'm assuming you weren't consulting with a health coach or a nutritionist or anything like that. I'm assuming you were doing this mostly by yourself.
No, I was actually.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was. I mean, but they like the doctor recommended it to me, so I would do like a little Zoom meeting with her like every 3 weeks. However, I did do some things she recommended, but like 80% of it, I kind of did my own thing for
So,
the most part.
all
But she
right.
did help me a little bit.
So
Yeah.
tell me what you did. I'd love to hear, since this was mostly a solo journey with a little bit of advice that you seem to kind of, that's cute, but I'll do what I want, right? I'd like to hear sort of what you did. Like what was the decision point for you, what you did, and then how hard you worked at this really?
A crazy amount of cardio exercise
Mhm.
that I still do a crazy amount of. Normally before that, I only worked out maybe 20 minutes
Mhm.
of relatively simple exercises, calisthenics. And so I transitioned to like the most intense cardio you can imagine. Just stuff on YouTube I would find basically. I didn't go to the gym. I haven't
Mhm.
been to the gym in a few years. And I just stood there and did those extra, like on average right now, between 1 and 2 hours a day of cardio,
Mhm.
plus running, plus running upstairs. So I get a good 2-3 hours of straight up exercise a day.
So, from my understanding, and a lot of this, you and I have not really had these conversations, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
intuitive. You have a job that requires you to be someplace, but leaves you quite a bit of like time on your own hands. And sometimes
Yeah.
it looks to me like you're in a place where you could exercise while you're at work. So I'm
I
assuming,
do jog there.
yeah,
Yeah, I
okay.
do jog
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I am able to do that. I can't really do much else. Like I actually do have to do some stuff there, but I can jog there and I can, do that. So I'm actually technically doing my job by jogging there. I'm patrolling the area, right? So
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
There's no rules about how you have to do it. You just have to do it. And
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Right.
smart, but it's actually smart. I mean, so to your point of like lots of cardio, this is something that like a lot of people, oh, let me turn that phone off. Hold on a second. A lot of people, you know, there's a lot of people out there who either A, don't really like to exercise, and so they're not really wanting to, or
Yeah.
for some reason feel that they can't exercise, right?
Right.
But to me, there's not two things. First of all, and this goes mostly for people who like subscribe to the same general basic reality that you and I do, like not the normie one, right? Like there isn't, I think movement is the best way to integrate all of the crazy information that we deal with. It just helps move through you better so that you're not like getting stuck. Like the information is sometimes really dark and heavy or confusing. It helps you to integrate it, but also like we're literally constantly describing a reality where at some point we may have to run for our lives. And so these people who don't actually think that they need to get themselves ready to do that, like I'm a little perplexed by that, right? Like
That's
I try
one of the
not to be
reasons.
judgmental, but I'm perplexed by that, you know, contradiction.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to make the transformation. I wanted to get in the best shape as I possibly can for a shit hit the fan scenario too. So that's one of the reasons. So you brought up a good point.
And so like, and it is just true. Like no matter what you do with diet, right? Like the process of losing weight is going to be massively accelerated by a lot of exercise. And it's also going to be how you maintain that. Like a lot of people can lose a lot of weight just by changing their diet. But if they don't ever pick up some form of exercise, and preferably some form of exercise that they actually enjoy so that they'll be inclined to do it for the long term, right? Then eventually the weight either creeps back on or they become what we call skinny fat, where they don't weigh a lot of pounds, but they're still not really healthy. They'll carry a lot of the weight in one section of their body. Right? So I didn't realize that you were into so much exercise. I myself exercise about 2 hours a day. You know, some days it's more like an hour and a half, other days it's 3 hours. But
same here.
Yeah, I do it. Did you change your diet?
Yeah, no, I did. It wasn't just exercise alone. It's not really like what I ate as so much as calorie intake. It's hard to say, but at my absolute lowest point, like the craziest amount, like I probably ate like 1,200 calories a day, but so pretty low. And do it with all that exercise, it was really, really brutal. I mean, I would get dizzy often. It was rough. So I had to increase that a little bit to right now I'm doing like probably 1,500 to 1,700 a day. And it's helped a lot to kind of not feel like I'm starving and, you know, so, and yeah, I did increase fruit and vegetable intake too. So my diet in general has gotten a bit healthier, but I haven't like completely cut off stuff I love, you know, like I eat chocolate still almost every day, you know, I eat ice cream. I'm not going to, I eat much smaller portions though. Like, whereas before I would eat like a big bowl of ice cream. Now I would eat like a cup, maybe a small cup. I would eat like half a chocolate bar, and now I would eat maybe 3 pieces. So that's the difference. Yeah.
So okay, so you did some diet changes, but mostly just amount of food you were eating. You didn't kind of switch to a particular style of eating or diet. You just generally improved the quality of your diet and then minimized the amount of size of the food. That is a very, particularly if you don't have other significant health things going on, that is a very valid way to do it, right? Like to lose weight, especially if you're just trying to lose weight. Now, like for some people who really want to get into optimal performance, right? Then you could get into a situation where you're like, okay, I'm going to restrict certain food groups and expand the consumption of other food groups, or I can get into counting your micros and your macros, or cycling different kinds of eating and things like that. But for someone who's in generally good health and just overweight and looking to lose weight, that's a perfectly valid way to do it, right? You know, I have my preferred, you know, styles of dealing with health, which have morphed and changed over time, right? And you know, and at times I've done exactly what you talk about, right? Just be like, I'm going to eat whatever I want, but I'm just going to eat a few bites of it, right? Or just a little bit of it and whatnot. And then other times, particularly for me, times when I'm doing like massive amounts of exercise, I tend to go towards a diet that allows me to eat a lot of food, but it's all very like good health, good for me kind of food and whatnot. So, okay. Now, were you like a serious overeater before? Did you get overweight by like really overindulging, or did you just get overweight by like what seems to happen to so many people in modern life, that just like all of a sudden you went from someone who was maybe fairly active as a kid to spending a lot of time sitting in front of the computer and, you know, not, you know, while you weren't being overindulgent, you weren't paying the same kind of mind to what you ate that maybe your mother did when she was trying to prepare nutritious meals for you when you were a kid. And before you knew it, it's like, how the fuck did this happen? Was it overindulgence, or was it just not paying close enough attention to sort of tending to yourself in the right way?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a combination of both. Definitely a combination, because sometimes I would just not pay. Well, for the most part, I just didn't pay attention or just didn't care. Like I just was like, whatever, gonna do whatever I want. No discipline, you know, like I just didn't care. And other times, I would say it was kind of maybe an addictive sort of binge eating. It just depended on the day. And, you know, I've had issues like that with other, you know, with alcohol and drugs too, especially when I was a teenager. So when I quit those things a long time ago, I kind of gravitated towards
Sugar.
food, maybe. So I do think it's an addictive tendency to binge eat. However, not always. So like for example, in the last 2-3 years, I can't say like this entire time it was totally addictive binge eating. No, but there were periods when I did maybe use it as a coping mechanism, or, you know, transitioning from one addiction to another, which struggles with addictions my whole life. I think there is a connection to those former addictions to food. I definitely think there's a connection. Yeah.
So it's interesting. So one of the things a lot of people don't know, because it's been intentionally not something people are led to understand, is that many people suffer from what's called saccharine or low blood sugar disease, which is different than like high blood sugar, like diabetic, but it has some of the same kind of results. So what it is some people have naturally, their blood sugar is naturally a little bit low. So whenever they do eat something that is either very sugary and sweet, obviously, or even something that you wouldn't understand as that, something super starchy and carby that breaks down to a lot of sugar but doesn't taste sweet, so you're not in your head monitoring your sugar intake, it spikes up much higher for them, and then the crash is lower, which leads them wanting more and wanting more. And what a lot of people who deal in what's called orthomolecular nutrition or orthomolecular psychiatry have find is that these people often are lacking in vitamin B3 and vitamin C, and also that they tend to become either alcoholics or drug addicts, and that alcoholism and drug addiction are advanced stages of saccharine disease. So when they're no longer able to like hit the high or recover from the low quick enough from sugar, they will move on to alcohol or drugs, or just when at the first times they try those things, their response to them is stronger. Right. And so, right. And like they're more sensitive to that up and down kind of thing. And it's very, very common for people, whether they naturally have low blood sugar or not, to when they come off of drugs or alcohol to pick up a sugar habit, because people don't realize how related to blood sugar, alcohol. It's more known with alcohol, but not as well known with sugar, right? And with drugs, with drugs. And so you often see someone coming off of meth or heroin, eating a lot of candy, right? Less so with certain other drugs. Obviously, when people are smoking pot, they're eating brown, a lot of snack foods and stuff. It's not as much of a sugar relation. But you see this connection, right? And it also is this deficiency in B3 and C is also a lot of times related to things that people have been told are mental illnesses like bipolar and schizophrenia, which are also sometimes what like drug behavior looks like. When you've been on drugs and coming off of drugs, you start to mirror that. And a lot of these things are actually solved or like greatly resolved by increasing B3 and C, right? And so people generally, one of the things that happens when someone is low in certain vitamins or minerals is they will crave sugar, right? The amount of sugar that's been presented in the American diet has increased as the amount of minerals in the soil has decreased. And so this like inverse relationship that has confused a lot of things for people, right?
And
so
I do take a lot of vitamins
going on, right? I also wanted to ask you, like, how much, in what ways did some of this ebbing and flowing or waxing and waning of your health and your body match sort of first, like you're waking up, like you're awakening, and then as you moved past like the levels 1, 2, and 3 of awakening and into this more very strange, like metaphysical realm, or seriously, and not like when we're kids, there's anomalies, but we think of them as like sort of ghost stories or just weird, like fantasy land or whatever. Then we have awakenings. Then we start to experience far stranger anomalies than we ever did before. And then we realize the truth thing and the anomalies are kind of connected, like both on the way up in terms of weight and then on the way down. Like, how did this ride along with that? Was there correlation in a way that you can see?
Oh, wow. That is an interesting question. I would say that it has, I don't know. I don't think it has had as much of an effect as I would have thought.
Let me ask you some particular questions, and maybe that will help you with this more. Okay. So first of all, like you said, sometimes you used your food addictions to cope, right?
Yeah.
When you get to a certain point of a truth awakening, okay, so not like when I know you've had funny dreams and weird experiences and stuff, right? And so that can be, either interesting or confusing or whatever as a kid, but generally you have those from the time that you're a kid, so you're kind of used to them. You might not be able, other kids might not be able to relate or your parents might think you're weird, but it's something that like was happening all the time. But then all of a sudden at a certain point when you discover the world isn't what we've been told, right? Like generally discover, depending on your avenue in, it's usually either it's like the chemtrails or the GMOs or 9/11 or one of the school shootings or something like that is the entree. And then within a couple of years, it's dominating your life. And then you find your way to like the really dark, disturbing material. And for me, I noticed that the more like there was a certain space in there, particularly when I found my way, and this was long before it was commonly publicly discussed, when I found my way to the mind control and like the child trafficking and the stuff that's even far darker and dirtier than the Eatsigate pay stuff, like that was when my drug use really increased. And it was almost like I kept looking, I kept doing the research, and it was almost like it was numbing me to be able to do it. Like if I had tried to do that as a sober, well person, I wouldn't have been able to function.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, since you put it that way, I definitely do think there is a correlation. It sort of an escape from a lot of that dark research, which I think has reached the peak darkness probably in 2019, 2020, around that time, which was probably connected with the peak of my weight too. So yes, I'm gonna say that they're definitely that researching this type of stuff and being into it and the world unfolding as it is,
Mhm.
definitely used that as part of the coping mechanism to try to fight against that. I would say, since you put it that way, there's definitely a connection.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
I'm not trying to lead you. So if it's not, please tell me, but I'm just trying to track because I think I'm going, like, you're a particularly unique example for like a theory that I have here. And if it doesn't match, then it doesn't match. But if it does, it gives us a lot of information to work with in terms of trying to understand how the reality works. Right. Okay. So when you were during this, like as you were in your heaviest, darkest research period, was there an increase in the number of like anomalies you noticed in reality, and also in terms of the weird experiences you had when you were in that phase? Were they more or were they less?
Well, definitely more. Okay, so when I started my channel, so the number of crazy weird dreams were definitely exponential from like 2019 to like the end of 2020. So I started sharing my dreams in November 2019. And this stuff like sort of peaked towards like the end of 2020. And then it started to taper off, like these sort of weird, or so the owl sightings are almost non-existent now, for example. Remember we talked about the white owl? Almost gone. The weird dreams are becoming much more rare. I would be lucky if I shared a couple a month at this point, where before it would be several times a week. So there's definitely a correlation and definitely a decrease. There definitely is a connection. So the amount of weirdness has probably decreased overall, actually.
How about Mandela effects? What on the way up?
Oh,
How about Mandela effects?
I don't think that's ever gonna. I don't think that's ever gonna decrease or go away, honestly. Well, actually, yeah, maybe I'm paying a little bit less attention to it, but still, there's always something new that comes up with the Mandela effect. Like, it's just one of those things that I don't think is ever gonna go away, or it's hard to say. I think there was that has also reached the peak, probably around that same time frame, end of 2020. But I've talked about it quite a lot since then too. So that's a little bit more complicated with that subject in particular, I think.
And what about your memory? How has your memory been, both when you've been like when you were on your way up, gaining weight, and then as this weight loss process happened and then sort of levels off when you hit the sort of healthy spot? What is have you noticed any fluctuations in your memory?
Yes. Wow, I'm so glad you asked that question. My memory has gotten worse. Oddly enough, I don't know why. You would think it would improve, but I'm struggling. I always had an extremely good, especially long-term memory. Over the last year or so, it's not like that whatsoever. It's starting to fade, and I'm starting to be in like this more timeless condition and state where I can't. It's hard to explain, but yes.
All right. All right, now I'm going to lay it on you. Okay. So I've been like, I have all these theories I've been working with for a bit, and some of them are pretty, like, I'm pretty set on them and they've been pretty consistent, stayed the same. And then other things new come and go. So about 5 years ago now, I and it was basically like pretty much a channeled idea, right? Like because of my awareness of some things related to nutrition, some of it I was able to sort of, complement it with what I knew. And then I did some more research and whatnot. But I basically channeled this series that I did called Sugar as Programmable Matter. Okay. And it was very early on in my media days. And sometimes it's painful for me to watch because I was so unpolished. And because I was channeling it, I wasn't trying to like edit myself or make it sound smooth necessarily. Right. And I've thought many times, and people have suggested that for business purposes or for, getting wider spread views, that I should go back and polish it up or redo it. But you'll lose something. It is so raw what I was doing, right? I was just dumping all of this information about this idea that sugar is crystalline in nature and can hold information, right? And that we are constantly consuming this stuff. And that some of the ideas came from my experience with crystal meth, that it is also a crystalline substance that seems to hold information and has a tremendous effect on the behavior of the people who are consuming it, right? Yeah. And the two things were quite similar. And I did studies on sugar, I did studies on crystals, I did studies on time. I went into every pocket and window of things I could imagine. I got into looking at the crystalline fluid that's in vaping pens and things like this. I just went absolutely hog wild with it. Like at first people were like, well, this chick sounds batshit, but a few of the ideas are good. And then over time, like maybe the most batshit ideas panned out to be pretty true. Right. And some of the ideas were validated by DARPA and papers from Brown that came out later and different stuff. I'm not saying for that purpose, but one of the things that came out on the paper from Brown that was subsidized by DARPA, it came out in 2019. Okay. And the research was done in 2018 and my series was in 2017. And it talked about how useful sugar molecules were for holding tremendous amounts of information.
Oh, wow.
They could literally hold, it was incredible the amount. And then further connected research showed that human DNA is actually one of the best places to store information. So literally humans are being used data hard drives and things like that. Yeah. Right. And because we eat sugar, that's that is introducing new information, and then it's being held in these ways, kind of being held in our bodies essentially, right? And Sophia's gotten into things related to this and whatnot. You also had, one of the things I said in that early series was that sugars had windows in it, and the question came up: do you mean windows like the kind that are in crystals? You know what I'm talking about? How there's kinds of, right? Or do you mean Windows, like Bill Gates, operating system? I was like, oh, right. So I kind of went back in and did what I was doing and whatever. And I was like, well, possibly both, but yes, I think we're talking more like Windows, like an operating system. One of the things that came out in the early days of the pandemic was that one of the technologies being played with for the countermeasures, I'm going to watch my language here, would have been used needles made really small, thin, sharp needles made of sugar crystals that would upload the operating system into the body, right? You could you can listen to, I think John Rappaport and Catherine Austin Fitz talked about that early on, that was one of the technologies being played with. And that also kind of matched with some of the stuff that I had said. So you had this paper come out, this tweet from DARPA linking to this paper in 2019, and then some of this other stuff that's happened. And I was like, okay. And people will sometimes send me a link to something that sounds like something I said when I was talking about that. I almost forget a lot of the information now, because sometimes memory part of it, but also when I'm I'm done, and there's a reason to really go back. But I also understand that, so we get fat from consuming sugar. We don't get fat from eating fat generally. If we eat sugar, right? Yep. The information comes into our body, it sort of does some process. And the result is we get fat and we have a buildup of information, kind of like when your computer gets too full and you have to go through and sort of clean it out. But when you have so much information on your computer, it starts to get really slow. Right? Like, and the slow computer is full of like, it's bloated with all sorts of information. So as you were consuming all of this information on the way up, right, and you're eating in this way, it's all getting stored. So you had all of this information in your body, and you're having, and live in frequency soup, right? So there's things flying through the air all the time with Wi-Fi and EMF and ELF and all that kind of stuff. And also you're continuing to eat, adding more information, or adding like a substance that is receptive. Like sugar is crystal. Yeah. So crystals hold information, and we have all this shit flying through the ethers, right? It has a place to sit itself down and add itself to the pile that turns to fat. And then it all sort of gets mushed together. You're having weird, crazy dreams, right? Weird, crazy experiences. And they're all sort of stacked on top of each other. And you have all this information in your body and in your mind. And you're like, wow, I know a lot of shit. My memory is really good, right? And then, so first of all, whether you're overweight or not, human cells turn over every 7 years. You have cell death and regeneration. And if those cells are holding information, it would make sense that you might lose track of that information when the cell dies, right? But also when you begin to lose weight at any pace, but it's more noticeable when you lose it at a quick pace. It's kind of like when you delete a lot of files off your computer, suddenly all of that information is not there. And there may still be some resonance of it, right? You don't actually, I mean, I don't know how, I'm not a scientist, I'm a nutrition consultant. I haven't done like, the body chemistry stuff or, I'm not even a regular nutritionist that's gone through a serious scientific program. I've just figured out, eat this, this works, eat that, that doesn't work, whatever. Right. But, there's this constant changing of the information that's in the body. And when you lose 100 pounds, it's kind of like, like that's a whole hard drive worth of information. So you now have, right?
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And the memories are not as vivid anymore too.
Right.
Except for like, the peak stuff, like my NDE, that will never change, for example. But like other stuff is not nearly as vivid as it was before. It's like my memories have become a lot more subtle and more energetic in their quality rather than just imprints in my mind.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, the vibration, like the resonance of them is still there, right? Like there's evidence that the file was once there, but all of the data has sort of been removed to make room for new experiences, or because you just don't need, you're not carrying all the experiences around anymore.
Yeah.
Right? You just are
I like the way you put it. Yeah.
Right. There's just like this sort of essence of it is still with you. But if you try to dig and get all those granular details out, it's like you can't do it anymore. And if you try to, it almost ruins whatever that like homeopathic dose that's still left is.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So there's that, right? So you're losing weight, and I don't know if it's like, okay, you're like, fat is storing stuff, it's crystalline, it's stuck, you've lost all that, but it's also just been partly rearranged, which would also lead to some of like the confusion around memory, right? Like you haven't lost all of it, but your body looks different. Like there was a lot of stuff over here and now it's not. And now you have some muscles in some other place. So a lot of stuff has been lost. Like, it's like kind of like you took all the things you didn't want to the Goodwill, and the things left in your house, you rearranged to make it look neater and make it look how you like. And someone's coming into the same house and you haven't actually got anything new, but it all looks new because you got rid of old shit and rearranged and cleaned up the shit that you kept that you liked.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So there's that. So then so the other thing is with the Mandela effects. Right. So two things. So you had all this information that was stored inside of you, and the way it was layering itself or communicating, like, let's just pretend that like each fat cell is like a podcast, right? And you have 2 podcasts stored in there inside you, or 3 or 10 or 500. And then like when you're sleeping, everything gets confused and they're talking to each other. So it's creating all of these weird experiences. And now you have less podcasts on your hard drive. And so there's like less overlap and confusion. Like what things are is just a little bit more clear about what things are. Right.
Yep.
So that possibility. And then also like with the Mandela effects, like you recorded a version of reality when you were 190 pounds, and then another version when you were 200, and another version when you're 205, and up and up and up and up. And as you're losing the weight, it's like deleting versions of reality, right? And it would make sense that some things are different because you have actually less information, right? So all of these occurrences and things that you noted, like we're going to get into some of this in the second half. We're going to talk about some of the things we more usually talk about. But like, for example, something like Avril Lavigne in a Got Milk commercial is not super important.
Yes.
Right? Like that would be the kind of thing that if you're cleaning the house out, like let that one go, right? Like who cares about that one? So I think that some of this that you have been experiencing is literally like if each cell in your body is a fractal of the universal whole, right? You know, like about fractal. You've looked into fractals a lot, right?
Yep,
it's basically right. So it's like each one like mostly the same, but there's like one difference in each little part, but it all makes up the whole kind of thing. You're losing some of the fractals. It's like, it's kind of like losing your marbles is what it feels like a little bit at the time, right? And then at the end, you're sort of left with less iterations, and it seems like some of them are missing, right? But like, we wonder how many of them were real to begin with. Like we're seemingly like shown a different movie every day, right? And we stack them away in our memory, right? But not many of us are pretty clear on like, we think we know the difference between when we're awake and when we're sleeping. But do we really? Because sometimes we're confused when we wake up.
No.
So the way we're stacking that all away, right? And we're storing them all as memories, and maybe the ones that fall away when we lose body weight or we stop eating sugar or something like that are the ones that like were maybe the most not real or the most synthetic or the something to begin with. And what we're left with is the thing that is actually real. Or vice versa, could be the other way around too, but right? So you've lost a lot of marbles. Like, let's just pretend fat cells are marbles, right? And when you guess how many are in the jar, you have a lot less in the jar than you had last July. And I saw you had a post. Like I sort of intuitively connect with you by just like reading some of your posts on Facebook or YouTube. And I don't have time to watch lots of videos and stuff, but I can read a sentence or two of your posts and sort of tune in on where you're at. And you had one just a few days ago about this transformation you've been going through and how you can really feel it, that things are getting refined down, like they're not so, right? You had, I think that was pretty much what your post was a couple of days ago, how much you felt that you were in this huge process of transformation.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think it's possible as you're getting close to like that space where you're in the physical condition that you need to be for whatever reality is going to be, you are left with the things you need to know and the sort of anomalies that are novel and is interesting and fun and whatever it is to talk about them, right? Like you don't really need them anymore. That doesn't mean that the experience was any less. Like, how crazy this whatever the fuck we're in can get, and you can handle it, right? But right now you're in like sort of this you talk about getting in shape for whatever's coming, and maybe shit hit the fan is coming, or maybe it's something wonderful coming, right? But it's hard to go into something wonderful when you're carrying around all the old stuff, right? So that's kind of like, because of how I know you, and I watched you cycle through all these iterations of reality all the time. And then I didn't know this other thing was going on in the background. But when I look at the arc of even just the time that I've known you, I'm like, your body and what was going on inside of your body health-wise has massively contributed to the way you've been experiencing all of these anomalies.
Yeah, that's so true. Now that I look at it, that's so true. Yes. It has to be the case. Yeah.
I mean, you think about like food is made up of like fatty acids and amino acids and proteins, and they put them, when you look at like, if you look up like, Google stuff about like fatty acid chains or amino acid chain, it looks like our Tinker toys or Lego, things like that from when we were little, right? Like you start with something simple and you connect it to something else and you build these entire things that look like models of reality. And that's what like our insides are sort of made of, right? And so change when you start using only specific blocks to build, right? You get rid of the ones that like are sort of cheap or shitty or whatever. When you only use the good stuff and you're very clear about what the structure is you're building, it's a lot neater and easier to understand, right? So anyway, my mind went wild with that when I found out you had lost 100 pounds. So I thought I would kind of ask you some questions about it and see what you thought about that. And any other, like, you know, really any other things that have changed massively in your life over the course of the last year that either you attribute to the weight loss, like obviously your health changes, that's obvious, but other things that have changed that you attribute to your weight loss, or even now that we've kind of had this discussion, things that you would never have thought were related, you're like, oh, well, actually this happened over the course of the last year too.
Yes. I'm starting to not latch on to things as I have done before, and letting go has become easier, where I don't have things play over in my mind over and over again in these loops of memory, like we just discussed, where I could, you know, learn about something or grasp something and I won't latch onto it anymore as I did before. And this actually is more of a newer thing, like over the last few weeks. This has especially increased, but I'm really learning to be in the moment more than ever before. That's kind of a weird way of putting it, I guess. Whereas I'm starting to realize that this entire time I've really been either living in the past or the future. And it sounds a little bit new agey, but I think I am transitioning to trying to be in the moment more and more. And like I said, especially the last few weeks, this has been like some weird ongoing transformation. So yeah.
Well, cool. Well, continue to pay attention to it as this transformation like continues, right? Because sort of once, especially now that you're kind of at the place, are you trying to lose more weight or are you done?
Maybe a few more pounds, but nothing too crazy. Yeah.
Right. When this becomes your new normal, right? And it kind of sets in and you start to be able to just like move forward from that place, right? Yeah. It'll be interesting to sort of see what develops, right? Like how the reality is going to become stable in a way that it hasn't been for a long time. Yeah. And I think that that's been, you know, we live in a chaotic world. And if there's chaos going on inside of our body, then it's like really, really crazy, right? But when you get to a place where you have stability in your own body and mind, at least the ability that you're able to control yourself, right? Like some things are external factors and the only thing we can control is how we respond to them. You know, the reality is going to continue doing what it always did, right?
Yeah.
Going to feel a lot different. And suddenly sometimes it feels like, well, the world doesn't feel as crazy as I thought it was. Or maybe it was me, though. Right. And other times it's not. Other times it's like, I had some batshit, whatever, but I feel fine in here. Right. This feels fine. So I look forward to hearing sort of as you continue down this path, you know, sort of what the sort of not the results, but like what your perceptions are in terms of reality. So congratulations on that. And I encourage people like, if there's a change you need to make in your body for whatever reason, like you don't have to want to be super athletic or you don't have to be a vain person. I happen to be both. Right. But you know, like it does change how the reality affects you. And for people who feel not in control, it can be a really good tool to help you feel a little bit more balanced and in control and in the driver's seat. Yeah. So,
that's so true.
So take inspiration from Daniel. There's, you know, there's people like myself here to help people on this journey, or you can go it alone. There's no reason. Like everybody who's figured out how to be here listening to us right now can do a little research and figure out things that you can do on your own. But this is a great time to do it, because maybe it's not even going to be that like there's something we need to run from. Maybe something will appear that like we want to run to, and getting there in a timely fashion, right, would serve us, right? So sometimes just changing the psychology as well. So, all right. So we're gonna. Anything else you want to say about this health adventure you've been on, and then we're gonna move over into the patron section and talk about the woo.
No, just don't, if anybody plans on doing this, overcome your minds and your limitations as to like, if you don't feel like doing it, do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter how you feel. If you're tired, if you're lazy, just keep doing it. Overcome that. That's what helped me. So it's really simple advice, but it works.
You can, and people, I was, you can always go for a walk, right? Like on days, like I like to try and run about 8 to 10 miles. On days I can't run, I still walk the same distance, even though it takes longer, right? It takes longer. So, okay, I give up some time sitting in front of the YouTube, you know, feeding that stuff to myself or whatever. But, you know, like walking is great exercise. Just do it longer if you're unable. And you know, the high cardio does help, right? There's not really that is the truth. So, all right. So we're going to move over into this. Well, it's now the sort of just general supporter section, and I want to talk to you a little bit about Ukraine because of your own, you know, background and connections. But I also want to talk about some of these recent sort of Mandela effects and anomalies that you've been talking about, and what I think some of them might actually mean. I want to kind of go a little different take on them and chat. Okay. So you guys can find the next segment on patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, and now also on Rockfin. So rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. All the links will be below. If you're looking for Daniel, I think it's mostly still your YouTube, right? Dreams and other stuff?
Yeah.
All right.
Dreams and the Cosmic Trip.
That's right. Dreams and the Cosmic Trip now. You switched it. Okay. Right. You Mandela affected your YouTube channel. Yeah. Confuse people. Right. All right. So guys, he shares a lot of videos and just thoughts and whatnot. You guys can follow him there, and we will see you on the other side.